Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. Last month, research from Kantar released its landmark Brandsy Most Valuable Brands report that ranks brands according to their brand value. Globally, the top 5 brands are Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Tencent. In India, the top 5 brands include TCS, HDFC Bank, Infosys, Airtel, and Asian Paints. To know more, we spoke to Deepender Rana, the Executive Managing Director for South Asia Insights Division at Kantar. So what can brand managers learn from this ranked list? Let's find out as we get ready to melt with Deepender Rana. So Rana, let's start with some key definitions to help us understand. There are 3 terms. There's financial value, brand contribution, and brand value. Can you break this down for us?
So financial value is just the total enterprise or company value, right? So what you would say is the sort of capitalization, market capitalization. And then, what we do in Brandsy is essentially, when we look at brand value, we're trying to sort of say what part of that total value for a company is coming from the relevant brand. So in case of, for example, Hindustan Unilever, we would break it down by different brands. So obviously this is all drawn from published information sources, right? And then what we are trying to do is look at the intangible value created by the brand. And then similar to like you have a PE multiple, there's also a brand multiple, right? So that's what is used to arrive at the intangible value of the brand. But then there are stronger brands and there are weaker brands. And stronger brands have what we call a stronger brand contribution. So there's a brand contribution score. And that's what is unique about Brandsy, because that brand contribution score comes from consumer interviews that we do, unlike any other valuation methodology in the world. So stronger brands have greater brand power and hence a higher contribution score. So assume there are 2 companies or 2 brands with the same market capitalization. A stronger brand would end up having a higher brand valuation because of that higher contribution, right? And just to be very clear, brand power, it helps a brand in 2 different ways. A strong brand grows volume share, because people are more predisposed to buy it, right? And then the second thing is a strong brand also enables it to charge a premium over brands. So that helps your value share, right? And then it helps profitability as well. And that's what finally contributes to organizational value as well.
So metrics like market cap and PE are easily calculable.
Right.
How do brands demonstrate their value to shareholders, for instance, if there are many intangibles involved?
Right. So, it's through, obviously, methodologies like
the Brandsy,
brand valuations, which are able to model it out through a sort of our proprietary methodology. And that makes, decision-making easier for stakeholders. So, for example, a private equity, wants to acquire a company and wants to see what is the intangible brand value. Or I, as a brand owner, have a portfolio brand and I want to sort of see where do I want to invest. Or the other way is if I'm a CMO and I want to sort of prove to my CEO that, look, the work I've done has created value for the organization. I'm not just sort of frittered away, marketing money or advertising money. Then I'm able to prove through increased brand value that I'm creating stored value for the company through increased brand value. Because, what we have seen is that, for example, when it comes to market downturns or even a stock market downturn, it's the strong brands which are more resilient. They don't go down as much as the rest of the market does. And similarly, when things bounce back, they bounce back faster, right? So it's almost like, that's why we say to our sort of marketers or our clients that, look, through thick or thin, through dark periods, through recessions, keep investing in the brand, because you're creating, brand value for the future.
And there's a sort of stored value that can be exploited, for instance, in times of a downturn or during periods of fear.
Right.
What are the global top 10 brands doing exactly right according to the Brandsy report?
There are 2 parts to that. I think some of it is what the brands themselves are doing. And then the other thing is, are they in a sweet spot as far as, the consumer trends are concerned? So for example, you would see now the global brands, both globally and in India, are dominated by technology brands, and they've been going up the faster. So that obviously is a 2-way street. In some ways, the world is digitizing, and these brands are riding the trend. But then on the other hand, some of the most visionary brands are also driving those trends. I mean, a good example is Meta, which, ex-Facebook, which used to be basically an advertising, in a way, it's a publisher, right?
Mhm.
So they sold ads. But now if you look at, they're pivoting to the metaverse, right? And that's where they hope to create future value. So in a way, let's see whether that happens or not. But in a way, they benefited from the trend of advertising moving online, and especially social advertising. But they're trying to create a future trend of the metaverse, right? So that's what these brands are doing well. And the other thing is they're just getting the fundamental rights. Whether you are a tech brand or a non-tech brand, I think what these brands are trying to do is, and I mean, we in Kantar look at three pillars of what makes brands strong. One is they are salient, right? So when it comes to when the consumer feels a need for the category, they are the first ones to come to mind, right? So that creates a predisposition itself. The second is this is usually not empty salience. It's behind a specific meaning, whether that meaning is about being the best at fulfilling the consumer need in a functional way, or through creating sort of memories about being a loved brand, right? So that's what we're calling meaning. And then the third thing we know which creates predisposition is the ability to stand out. Like, how am I unique from competition, which we call differentiation, right? So meaningful, different, and salient. Usually these three brands will be, the top brands will be scoring higher on these compared to the other brands, and sort of just driving greater brand power as a result.
Rana, like you said, tech seems to dominate your brand Z in the global rankings. Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Tencent, not a single FMCG company in the top 5. Why?
Well, I mean, there used to be the Coca-Colas, and I mean, you do have Visa, which is in the top 10. I don't know
McDonald's as well.
McDonald's as
FMCG
well.
that we have.
But the funny thing is, I mean, even if you look at McDonald's, it's now, it's almost like a half technology experience. You go and, there are portals where you pre-order, and so they are all using
But luckily, we
technology
still have
in
to eat the burger. A robot will not eat the burger
to
for you.
drink the Coke.
Yeah.
But a lot of these brands are also trying to create an O2O experience. I mean, like in the Indian context, if you look at a Nykaa, which started off as an online brand, is also moving offline now and is trying to create an O2O experience for its consumers. So I think the world is kind of becoming almost like agnostic in that sense. As far as the consumer is concerned, it's both offline and online experiences. I mean, on the other hand, if I look at let's say an Apple is very much, I think, is a mix of, a great product, but also a lot of value being created because it's sort of a digital ecosystem sitting behind that. So it's a right mix of tangibles and intangibles.
Still doesn't explain why no FMCG major in the top 10.
Because I think
FMCGs used to be the biggest, most loved brands, the biggest spenders.
Finally, if you look at it, what the market is looking for is, where is growth coming from? Where is
it's coming from the technology
disruption
side of the
coming
world.
from? I'm pretty sure, I mean, finally, the publishing business got disrupted by a lot of these top 5 brands, which are huge publishers, right? I mean, global advertising shifted to them. Similarly, global retail has shifted to them. So naturally, I mean, it is going to be the traditional brands in retail, the traditional brands in publishing that go down, and these brands will go up. And that explains it, right?
And how do global Indian brands stack up against their global peers?
So, I mean, if you look at India, again, it's a similar story. If you look at the share of the top 100, or in case of India, we're valuing top 75 brands, the share coming from technology, funnily enough, in the US, China, and India is about 1/3 each. But it's just in slightly different ways. I mean, India is a lot more of B2B tech. There is some B2, consumer tech as well. But what is unique about India is a B2B powerhouse through brands like TCS, Infosys, and so on. So that's what sets India sort of apart when it comes to, our dominance of technologies in a slightly different way. For example, compared to the US, which has a lot of hardware, which is, you have Intel and NVIDIA, like chip brands, or China, which is everything. I mean, China has got Alibaba, which is retail tech. But then you have
all sorts of things to all sorts of people.
TikTok, which is completely again a disruptor, or you have Didi, which is mobility tech, or they have all kinds.
So Rana, is studying a B2B brand very different from studying a B2C brand in terms from a Kantar research point of view?
Yeah, obviously when we interview, for the rest of the brands, we just interview consumers in India. But when we want to value a TCS or an Infosys, we would be talking to customers in US, where a lot of their business comes from. So it's against the relevant set. But when it comes to principles of success, I think a lot of them are similar. So if you look at, in terms of being a trusted brand, the clients of a TCS or Infosys would look at their brand equity that they built it up as a guarantee of being able to deliver. Or for example, if they are able to charge a premium over other brands, other B2B brands, is because they built a strong equity. Value. So you just do it differently. The other thing is, if you look at something like brand purpose, again, these brands also need to be very purposeful and sort of they need to make sure that they're treating their employees right, because that's their main asset, right? They're treating their supply chains right? Or they're being energy efficient. Because if you look at their clients, what they also, apart from the service delivery, their clients also want them to be sustainable, because many of the clients are being rated on sustainability reports where the suppliers that the clients work with need to be top in terms of sustainability as well, right? So these brands need to deliver on all these aspects, like traditional brands need to as well.
And what will it take for an Indian brand to get into the global top 10?
I think one is the sheer penetration and reach. If you look at how value gets created, one of the reasons that the American brands are in the top 10 and they dominate the top 10 is because they're global in nature, right? Even if you look at Chinese brands, China is the world's second largest economy and hence is a huge domestic economy. But then brands like TikTok have gone truly global. Alibaba is also global in the sense of the B2B part of Alibaba is global, right? And Tencent is a major player in online gaming globally. I think we need to create that level of overseas success. And I think at this point of time, I would still bet that it's going to be one of the B2B brands that does it. But hopefully, going forward, I don't know, Ola is going overseas, Oyo is going overseas.
It's interesting because your report also talks about Indian e-commerce players like Nykaa and Oyo and Flipkart. What are the challenges of brand building for the online, say, D2C players or the online commerce players?
I think the customer experience is extremely important in case of these brands. The second thing is, if they try to win customers just on back of deals, right? And they tend to do that a bit more because they're more cash to burn, right? They can afford to be a bit more.
And they spend a lot on advertising, especially television and film advertising.
Exactly. And they know that some of the value they're creating or what the market rewards them for is through customer acquisition. And that's why they're doing so much of this. But they need to be careful that if they are on, they're just using discounting to win and to retain.
That cannot be a brand platform, surely.
That cannot be a thing. So you do need to, for long-term success, they need to build strong brands which are not just salient, right, but also deliver a meaningful product which is differentiated from others. I think there's another point there which you kind of very rightly say, they advertise a lot, right, and that creates salience. So we call something, we have a metric called a salience gap, right, and what we see is brands which are only salient but are not as meaningful or differentiated, they don't tend to grow as much as brands which have a good balance of all three of them. So I think it's not good enough to just kind of advertising and be well known. You need to be known for something which consumers want.
So it's fascinating that you say it's not just salience, it has to be as meaningful salience as well, as where there's a salience gap. We'll get back to that a little later. What do marketers need to know about the term brand power? Indian marketers in particular.
No, so brand power is, I would say it's the same meaning across the world, specifically as it comes to Kantar. What does brand power do for you? It creates a consumer predisposition, right? So the way brands succeed is A, you create pull power, and the B, you activate, right? And activation is through your distribution reach or through the deals that you offer or how visible you are, right? We are not talking about that here. We are talking about the propensity to create pulling power. As a result of that, the positive predisposition itself leads to an increase in chances of being chosen for that brand when it comes to the moment of truth, right? You've set up a positive predisposition. It correlates to volume share growth, right? That's one. And then the second part, which I also mentioned, is a high brand power also leads to a willingness to pay a premium, right? And we have a specific metric for that called brand power premium as well. And what does brand premium do is you can grow value share better, number one, and then obviously it has an outsized contribution to your profitability, which again builds overall enterprise value.
And how do marketers go about building this brand power? Is it like going to the gym every day and building physical power?
So one thing is, like I said, you need to be aware that you need to be building salience. What do you stand for in terms of meaningful and being different? But then we also look at two additional elements to building brand power in India. So when we did some sort of modeling around what contributes to brand power in India, two additional things came out, which some of it will come as a surprise to people. Is one was brand purpose, and then the other one was sustainability, right? So one could say that sustainability is a bit of a luxury that only Western or rich consumers can afford, right? But when it comes to India, what we saw was we found that Indians were very worried about climate change, because after all, I mean, as a sort of not so rich country, we are not as well protected or insulated against climate change. I mean, you see our neighboring country example, Pakistan, 1/3 against underwater, or even our tech capital, Bangalore, going underwater, right? So we are not that well prepared, right? Being an emerging economy. So Indian consumers are very well aware of that. And as a result, India came as one of the top 3 countries in terms of being very worried about climate change. Now, that brings me to the point of what is the expectation of from consumers for brands to do something.
Not governments. They want brands to do
something. So we asked that question specifically. We said, who should do something about, So government came up, the society and the consumers themselves came up, but the brands also came up. And funnily enough, in India, again, the percentage of people who said that brand should do something about it was pretty high. And how can they do it is by facilitating the consumers to do. So as a consumer, I want to do something for the environment, but the brand is an enabler, right? If I want to use less plastic, the brand, by using less plastic, enables me to do it. Or if I want to, do carbon offsets, a brand, by promising to plant a tree, I mean, I won't go and plant a tree, but when a brand does it and says, okay, a proportion of what you're spending goes towards that, it helps me. Or when I kind of order on a let's say a Swiggy or a Zomato, when it comes with less packaging, I feel good about it, right? So the brand is a facilitator. That's kind of doing good. But then the other thing is the expectation that brands don't do harm to the environment. That's just baseline, right? So that's the consumer expectation here. So, there's water scarcity. If I'm a bottled water brand, I shouldn't be overdrawing, on the groundwater sources. That's a good example.
So do no harm and try to do some good.
Good. And enable the consumer to feel good by participating in that good. Yeah.
Rana, according to the Brandsy report, average brand power has decreased from 219 in 2018 to 173 in 2022. Your report interprets that to ask if brands are investing enough in brand building. What's the answer to that question? Are brands investing enough in brand building?
We feel they could be doing more. I think one of the sort of, I wouldn't call it flip side, but one of the things that happens with specifically with digital advertising is a big share of this digital spending going to activation rather than brand building.
Yep.
And it's a bit of like the tail wagging the dog, because what happens is when you measure success of digital campaigns using click-through, we know that click-through is not the equivalent of positive brand impact, right? You could have an ad which is actually annoying, but is acting as clickbait and gets more clicks. But that doesn't actually lead to positive brand feeling or doesn't necessarily build brand power, right? So a lot of the marketing spend is going behind stuff like this, simply because it is measurable.
Seductive, right? Performance marketing is a seductive way to market.
Exactly, and it's a bit short term, right? Sometimes
numbers and data all the time.
Everybody, CMOs are under pressure and CEO, whatever. So the temptation to kind of spend behind short term activation, which is more measurable, funnily enough, right? Because click-through like metrics kind of make you believe that you're getting results, which is a bit of a fallacy. That is happening a bit more, we feel.
Okay.
And also, like you pointed out, there is, I think, a bit of that sort of empty salience building happening in some sectors without a balance.
Good because you have lots of numbers and lots of data to support your performance marketing initiatives. Rana, according to Kantar, what is the brand imperative for 2022?
Make sure that you stand for something which is bigger than making profits, which is, have a strong brand purpose, which is all about helping the consumer, but also helping the society as large. Be sustainable, because that even in India is very, very relevant, right? And I think the third thing is find a way to kind of ride the digitization trend. You don't need to be a online brand to do that. You have established companies who are very strong players in offline, beginning to participate very strongly in the online ecosystem. So, Tata is launching a D2C, Sonata Coffee. So there are plenty of examples of large established offline brands participating in the digital ecosystem, and of course using digital touch points to build a more 360 brand experience as well. I mean, I think as far as the consumer is concerned, they're almost beginning to care less about whether you're an offline or online brand, as long as you're touching them
to me, and you resonate
in
with my
meaningful
values.
ways.
Rana, thank you very much for
It was a
talking to
pleasure
us on Melt.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm @Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.